Today's laboratory is another set of genetics handouts, which I brought, or at least I think I brought. Yeah, here they are. And I'll pass them out once we get started. But again, I wanted to cover some of these genetics topics because we haven't covered them yet before you actually did the exercise. So I'm not sure exactly how long this will take, perhaps another half an hour or so, and then we'll start it. Okay, we left off about in this section. This is what's called a karyotype. It's basically a microscopic view of a person's chromosomes, and it shows clearly that we are diploid creatures, meaning we have two of every chromosome, two chromosome 1s, two chromosome 2s, two chromosome 3s. These are called your homologous pairs of chromosomes. And so you have 23 homologous pairs. If you are a female, the 23rd pair is called the X chromosome, or that chromosome, the 23rd chromosome is called the X chromosome, not because of its shape, that's just what the name for it. And if you're a female, you have two of those X chromosomes, so 23 homologous pairs. But in males, the situation's slightly different. For males, for their 23rd pair, it's a non-homologous pair. One's still called the X chromosome, but the other's called the Y chromosome. It's a lot smaller chromosome. And those chromosomes are involved in determining what sex a person is. If this is the X chromosome, and this is the Y chromosome, there are genes on the X chromosome for female sex determination. In other words, there are genes there which promote the fetus, when it's still growing inside the mother's womb, to develop ovaries and vagina and all the female reproductive organs. Whereas on the Y chromosome, there are male sex determination genes. Genes that promote the fetus to develop testes and a penis and all the other male reproductive organs. So this is not just some bizarre difference between men and women. This is what makes you a male. If you have the Y chromosome, if you're XY, you are a male. That's what makes you a male. And if you're a female, having the two X chromosomes is what makes you a female. Okay, and I think I also showed you this, kind of a Punnett square that shows why about equal numbers of males and females are born. That when we go through meiosis, when we make our eggs or sperm, every pair of chromosomes by meiosis gets split into separate gamete cells. So that all female eggs carry one of our X chromosomes, and all male sperm carry either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. And then when the eggs meet the sperm, there are the possible combinations, and so half the babies that are born are females and half the babies that are born are males, other than this slight thing I told you that the sperm carrying the Y chromosome are slightly lighter, and so there tends to be slightly more males born than females, but it's almost statistically insignificant. And you sometimes hear this summarized, people saying the male controls the sex of the offspring. Now that wasn't always understood. There was a king of England, Henry VIII, who really wanted to have a son to inherit the throne, and when his first wife, who I think was Catherine of Aragon, didn't happen to produce any male children, he had her head cut off because he couldn't get a divorce. But he was, the point is he was blaming it on her. Well, if anybody really was to blame, it was he and his sperm for some reason. And then he married another woman. Her name was Anne Boleyn, I think, and she didn't happen to have any sons for him, so he made up some fake charge against her and had her head chopped off also. And I don't know how many wives he went through, but in the end, it was one of his daughters who inherited the throne after he died, not any son. So anyway, I guess the point here is it's the male that controls the sex of the offspring. Okay, now consider the male for a second. In the male embryo, there are genes to develop male sexual reproductive organs, and also genes to develop female reproductive organs, since males have the X and the Y chromosome. But what do they develop as? Well, they develop as males. So, not to sound sexist or anything like that, but the male genes are dominant over the female genes, in that inside the developing male fetus, you have two sets of conflicting instructions, and these ones are followed and these ones are not. So these act like recessive genes is what I'm saying. And you can even see some direct evidence of that. Occasionally a person is born with a chromosomal abnormality where they get the wrong number of sex chromosomes. Up there. Here. Sometimes people are born with this for their sex chromosomes, or sometimes even this for their sex chromosomes. Oh, actually, I guess I glossed over this. So the chromosomes that differ from one sex to another are called the sex chromosomes. In human beings, those are the X and the Y chromosomes. Whereas the chromosomes that everybody has, no matter whether they're male or female, are called the autosomes. Things like chromosome number 1 and chromosome number 2, like that. Anyhow, sometimes there are what's called aneuploidies, which means the person doesn't have the right number of chromosomes. And as you can see from this chart here, if you've got a Y chromosome, you're going to be male. It really doesn't matter how many X chromosomes you have, because those genes are recessive, so to speak, when compared to the genes on the Y chromosome. And so I remember reading somewhere, somebody summed it up nicely. They said, it's not having two X chromosomes that makes you female, it's lack of a Y chromosome that makes you female. And if you think about it that way, that fits the data. You can have a Y and 3 X's, a Y and 2 X's, a Y and 1 X. It doesn't matter. You're going to be a male as long as you have a Y. But if you're missing a Y, you are a female. All right. On the X and the Y are these genes for determining sex. On the X chromosome, you also found a whole bunch of other genes, which I'll call vital genes for both sexes. These are genes that both sexes need and benefit from. And just to give you some examples, there are genes on there for proper color vision. There are genes on there for proper blood clotting. There are genes on there for proper muscle function. Oh yeah, just as an aside, if you ever want to know what genes are on what particular chromosomes, there's a nice chart on the back of the classroom here that lists all the chromosomes and what genes are on them. Unfortunately, this was made from the perspective of diseases. And so, for instance, if you look at the X chromosome, it won't say color vision, it will say color blindness. It shows you what the disease is when you're missing the gene. But if you understand that and sort of think it backwards, say, okay, if you have color blindness, then that must be a gene that's giving me normal color vision when it works normally. Then you can see what's on each chromosome. Now, the Y chromosome, on the other hand, does not have any genes that are vital to normal, healthy survival. Why not? Well, it's a good question. Why not?
All females would die.
Yeah, all females would die because only males have a Y chromosome, and so it just wouldn't make any sense to stick really vital genes only on the Y chromosome. But it's okay to stick vital genes only on the X chromosome because everybody has an X chromosome. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. Now, this whole part of the genetic chapter that we're on now was on non-Mendelian genetics, things that don't follow Mendel's rules. And sex-linked genes follow cause non-Mendelian genetics. And sex-linked genes just means genes that are on the sex chromosomes. And when people use this term, they're almost always referring to the genes on the X chromosome. And here's the reason why you get non-Mendelian genetics, because men are haploid for those genes. Men only have one X chromosome, and so for all the genes that are on there, men only have one copy of, whereas, remember, we're supposed to be diploid creatures. When Mendel formulated his laws of genetics, he based them on the fact that everybody has two copies of each gene, because everybody was diploid. But this is an exception to the rule. For stuff on the X chromosome, men are definitely haploid. But of course, women having two are diploid the way they're supposed to be. And so that causes some interesting effects. And I'll use the color vision gene here on the X chromosome as an example. Let's see. Probably at some point you were tested for proper color vision, or if you want to think about it from a disease standpoint, you were tested for color blindness. There are proteins inside the cells of your eye that allow you to detect various colors. And if you're missing some of these proteins, then you're not going to see the colors correctly. And when you were tested for this, you probably looked at something like this. If you have the right ones for seeing the color red, then you can see that there's an 8 here in some red colors. But if you're missing that particular protein in the eye, you can't see the color red, and it kind of blends into the background, and then you really can't see any number there at all. So the gene for this protein, for this color perceiving protein, is located on the X chromosome. So it's one that women are diploid for and men are haploid for. And to see how it leads to non-Mendelian genetics, let's do imagine a crossing experiment, a breeding experiment. There's a woman and there's her partner. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that she has normal color vision, but that she's a carrier of the disorder, meaning she's heterozygous for it. And when you're doing Punnett squares for genes that are on the X chromosome, this is the way you do it. Draw the X chromosome as an X, and then in the upper right-hand corner, put the allele symbol there. Big C for normal color vision, and little c for the recessive disease of being colorblind. So can she see colors? Yeah, she can see them just fine. She's got a functional copy of that red detecting protein, so she's fine. And if I tell you the male has color vision, does he have big C or little c? He's got to have big C, because he only has one X chromosome, and so if he has normal color vision, you know he has a big C on that chromosome. All right, so they're going to have some kids here. And there are her gametes. And here are his gametes. And when you do the cross, this is what you see. Notice that all of the daughters will have color vision, but half the sons are going to be colorblind. So what we're seeing here is that for genes on the X chromosome, men tend to show the recessive phenotype more than females do. And here's the way I think about that. If a woman inherits a recessive gene on one of her X chromosomes, she's got a second chance, because she's going to inherit another X chromosome from the other parent. And the chance of getting two recessive alleles, if it's a disease allele, is pretty low, because recessive alleles tend to be pretty rare. I think I gave you an analogy last time that one time I found a $20 bill, so that's a rare event, but the chances of you finding two $20 bills on the same day is astronomically small. So the chance of getting two recessive alleles, one from each parent, is almost fractionally small or negligibly small. So females very rarely show up with these recessive sex-linked diseases. But with the male, all he has to do is get one bad gene, because he only has one X chromosome, and then he's sunk. He's got the genetic disease. And so I tried to say that here. The non-Mendelian genetics is this: men show more recessive phenotypes for these sex-linked genes because they don't have a second X chromosome like the females do that can cover up the recessive by having the dominant. Rolando?
So that could kind of be considered a disadvantage, right? A kind of, remember how I asked you if male embryos or male...
Or more fragile. Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so I would say this is definitely a disadvantage for males because you tend to show up more with more recessive genetic diseases, at least for the ones on the X chromosome. And actually, let me go on kind of a tangent subject related to that. The first forms of life on the planet Earth were supposed to be bacteria. And they are haploid, if you think about it. They only have one chromosome, so they only have one of each gene. But at some point, after billions of years of evolution, eukaryotic cells developed, most of which, not all of which, but most of which are diploid. So you now have two of everything.